Welcome to the first session of our celebration of the Deanship of William A. Graham. This session is entitled HDS in the New Century. Now, although we are involved in a celebration of Bill's deanship, Bill would be the very first person to say and to insist that whatever good happened was a team, a community effort, where people pulled together to make the Divinity School a better place for scholarship, for students, and a better citizen within the larger university. And in that spirit, we are going to, a group of colleagues are going to offer their reflections about HDS in the new century. And we're going to begin with the holder of the oldest chair of the university, the emeritus professor of the Hollis Chair in Divinity, Harvey Cox, who's going to look back over the decade. And we're going to end with a comment from the newest member of our tenured professors, Jonathan Walton, who in a few months, even a few weeks, is going to be the Pusey minister in Memorial Church. And the This is going to be your problem. Your title is so long that people will start applauding before the title is even finished. You've ever seen those business cards that you have to unfold? We will also be the Plummer Professor of Christian Morals and the Professor of Religion and Society here at the Divinity School, Jonathan Walton. In between, we have remarks from 4 professors, perhaps 5, from Ann Browdy, David Carrasco, David Lamberth, Dudley Rose, and if Diana Eck is able to make it back from an emergency at her house, she will have a few remarks, brief remarks to be made as well. I'm going to step now aside and allow each of the people come up. When they finish, the next can come. We will start with Harvey Cox, then will be Ann Browdy, David Carrasco, David Lamberth, Dudley Rose, and concluding Jonathan Walton, and then I'll take the podium again at that point. So we begin with Harvey.
What was happening in the world on December 15th, 2001? I bet you remember what was happening. The rest of us may not, so I'm here to remind you. The Pentagon announced that genuine progress was being made in its military effort in Afghanistan and that the end of hostilities was in sight. I'm not making this up. 2 members of the Gambino family were indicted in Los Angeles for the murder of a stripper. The leaders of the American Presbyterian Church announced that they expected a shortfall in their budget for the next year. But all of these events were completely eclipsed from our mind when we learned that William A. Graham had been appointed our new dean here at Harvard Divinity School. We greeted this news with enthusiasm, anticipation, but also with a degree of apprehensiveness. Not about Bill, because many of us knew him, but about the formidable challenges that lay in wait for him and for all of us in the years to follow. Here were 4 of those challenges that I would like to tick off. First, how could we continue to move the Divinity School closer to the other faculties and parts of Harvard University, a process that was already well underway? How could we continue that when we knew that there were faculty and students between here and Harvard Square who had not the shadiest idea of where the Divinity School was, and there were a few who didn't know it existed? Now, that was 10 years ago, and believe me, things have changed on that front. Number 2, how could we strengthen the Divinity School's relationship to actual existing communities of faith to contribute to their, quote, faith to their health and vitality. This is the wonderful phrase that the president of the university uses when she confers degrees on the graduates of this school at commencement. If you're listening to what happens, that's what she'll say this year, those of you who are going to graduate. Third, how could Harvard Divinity School embrace the vigorous new religious pluralism of America, of Harvard, and of the world in our courses, our faculty, our student body, without losing our historic identity in the Christian tradition? And fourth, could we succeed in the risky undertaking that we were embarked on of trying to be both a graduate school of religion and at the same time a school preparing professional leaders of religious communities? These were the final four, so to speak, the big hurdles over which all of us would have to leap, and our new dean would have to leap along with us. So how have we done in the 10 years since then, 10 years and change? I think we've done quite well. Relations with the rest of the university have improved and widened. The pathway between here and other parts of the university through parking lots and through volleyball courts is well worn, and there's more and more traffic back and forth, students and faculty moving along through there. It's not quite as hard to find your way as it used to be. We have offered joint courses, programs, conferences with medical school, law school, School of Education, Faculty of Arts and Sciences, Public Health. As far as I know, only the dental school has escaped cooperation with us. But I'm sure that will come. Our faculty members work closely in the Study of Religion program at the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. Number of courses for undergraduates has increased. I think we're doing pretty well on that front. A lot of this, of course, was due to the fact that in the last decade there has been increasing attention to religion in general for obvious reasons around the world. People have noticed and appreciated the importance of having a divinity school at a modern university, but we were greatly helped in this by having a dean during these 10 years who knew the ropes, who had been around the university, who knew, so to speak, where the skeletons were buried, even more where the money was, found his way, and that gave us a very positive help in making that transition. The result is, I think, that there's hardly anybody at Harvard that doesn't know we exist, and there are a lot more who know where we are. How about our relationship to communities of faith? It was during that decade that the education for ministry part of our school really came into its own. After decades of struggling against the canard that Harvard is a place for scholars, but not to train ministers. Now we are recognized across the country and around the world, I think, as a place in which both scholars and future ministers of religion learn together. We have a phrase for that. It's called the Learned Administering. The Learned Administering. We believe that, and at least I certainly believe, that learning to be a minister in the context of learning about the religions of the world is the only way to learn to be a minister in any of the existing traditions today. Some of us even try to inject a little bit of ministerial art into the preparation of scholars, for example, like listening. Seeing the big picture, some things like that. We keep trying. Third, what about religious pluralism? Here is the point at which the most visible and I think most welcome changes have occurred. We've broadened the gyre of denominational affiliations. The last time I looked, there were, 36, 38? Does anybody know? So now we have, and also the dramatic increase in the number of students and faculty members from traditions other than Christianity. So we have now Methodists sitting with Mormons. We have Presbyterians and Pentecostals in the same classroom. We have Baptists and Buddhists together. We even have UUAs and UCCs sharing in the learning process. I think that's moving along nicely, and I'm very pleased with it. We even have one student I noticed a few years ago who claimed on his card that he had invented his own religion. Good luck. Furthermore, I believe this has been accomplished not by sacrificing our historic roots as a Christian institution, but by deepening and exploring those roots, and even in that way contributing to the further development of the Christian tradition itself. Fourth, what about this business of being a school of religion and a theological school preparing people for ministry? I think we have also demonstrated that that is not only possible, I would take a further step and say it's the only way, the only viable way to prepare people for a responsible ministry in the modern world is to know about the history, theology, and teachings of the other religions that we willy-nilly live among. Not just in the world, but down the street and around the corner in American cities. So, here we are, 10 years later. Does it seem like 10 years, Bill? Or 10 years and change? I said 10 years and change. There have been some changes. From my perspective, they're very good changes. We're not there yet. We have a few more hurdles. How are we doing with our relations to communities of faith, for example? Well, pretty well. But what about all those Pentecostal congregations? What about those mushrooming megachurches? What about ethnic congregations? What about immigrant congregations where the growth and vitality of much of American religion lies? How are we doing with that? We need to keep moving, keep jumping. What about our religious diversity within the school? As one of our colleagues puts it, we are slowly moving from learning with each other to learning from each other. I think we need to deepen that. Now, there's a lot more to be done also in various kinds of diversity. The gender balance on the faculty, for example, has improved. It's improved a lot, by the way, since I first came, which was when Bill Graham was in junior high. When I first came to this faculty, do you know how many women, tenured women were on the faculty? Zilch, 0. So any improvement was 100% improvement after that. Now, latest count, I think 9 women among tenured faculty out of a total of 23. Our color diversity has changed, has improved very, very slowly. We are still moving. Now, some of this, of course, has to do with the fact that both the dean and the faculty had to wait until certain venerable but stubborn older members of the faculty eventually grazed their cows and folded their tents and made room for other people coming in. And let me encourage the rest of you who are on the edge of that choice to say that there is life after faculty meetings. Even after search committees, there is life. And I'm enjoying that life a lot, although I'll be teaching one seminar in the fall. It's hard to keep one little finger out of the pot. So, here we are, Bill, 10 years and change later. Did I say change? Well, the Gambino brothers, I think, are still in business or in the big house, one of the two. The Pentagon is still announcing that we are close to accomplishing our goals in Afghanistan. The Presbyterians are still trying to close their budget gap. But we have seen real changes, positive changes at Harvard Divinity School that we, the faculty and the dean, have managed to hurdle. So, we've done pretty well. And in a decade with 2 wars and 1 recession. But I'd like to add one other thought before I close, which is how Bill helped us to do this. I would use the word here, enabler. Enabler. Bill is the kind of leader I am reminded of as an avid but not particularly gifted jazz musician. I'm reminded when I think of how Bill works of the bass fiddle player. Now follow me here for a moment. The bass fiddle player in a jazz combo lays down the tempo, keeps the chord structure going, doesn't do very many solos, makes it possible for other people to solo, to do riffs, to do improvisations, makes everybody else sound good. If you're listening to jazz and the bass fiddle stops playing, it sounds very thin. People can wander off the beat. They can wander off the chord structure. And then when the bass fiddle comes back in, you may not notice what happened, but it all sounds much better. So, Bill, I suggest that as you leave the deanship, you may have a whole new career ahead of you. And I can help you negotiate that as a jazz bass player. I think you're well suited for the job, and to help you move into that new position, I have a couple of things I want to give you. These are the bass scores for 2 of my favorite tunes, which I think are particularly relevant for today's occasion. The first is called After You've Gone. And the second is There Will Never Be Another You. Thank you.
Harvey's always a hard act to follow. Particularly for me, who will speak to you and to Bill from a more humble perspective. As for Bill's entire deanship, I have worked with him both as a faculty colleague and also in the lingo of the profession, a direct report. And what a direct report implies is that we have had a monthly meeting over the last 10 years and in his office. And I would like to allow you to be a fly on the wall of those 70 to 80 monthly meetings that I enjoyed with Bill in his office upstairs. One thing that all his direct reports learned, it took us a couple of months, but maybe by the 4th or 5th month, you knew you had to bring a printed agenda. There must not be a lot of direct reports here. Otherwise, that would have been an explosive laughter at that moment. Either that or you're more shy than I am. I'm notoriously lacking in social graces. But we knew we had to have a printed agenda because Bill had things on his mind. And in those 70 to 80 monthly meetings, in which I tried to insert the business which I needed to accomplish, he had one thing on his mind, and that was building the faculty of this school. Almost every time I came into his office, he had another fresh, original, maybe possible idea about how to expand, enhance, develop, enrich, enlarge the faculty of this school. He stayed up nights. He must have stayed up nights dreaming and thinking and plotting about this, because that's what was always up front when I walked into his office, up front of my agenda. But it was thrilling to talk with him about that. It was thrilling to hear his hopes and dreams, his intrepid, resilient, impenetrable commitment to expanding, diversifying, and enriching the faculty of this school. So in my notorious lack of social graces, I will just take you to, for a moment, to the faculty of this school when he began his deanship, and I will just say in advance that I look forward to being corrected by my senior colleagues in the impressions of someone, myself, who was relatively new to the school and surely unaware of the enormous accomplishments of the rather grumpy group that ran this school, which was known as the Professorial Committee. Thankfully, of blessed memory. This group of esteemed and distinguished individuals, it was my own personal feeling that the whole did not equal the sum of the parts. That is, that what came out of this room did not equal in quality the potential of what entered at the beginning. We met next door in the Pfeiffer room. Under Bill's watch, the Professorial Committee ceased to exist. At that time, junior faculty were not involved in the governance of the school, and there was really no reason for them to be. The school had not tenured a junior faculty member in 20 years when Bill came here. And the term tenure track was not used at this institution, or really anywhere at Harvard, but we participated in that problem. There was no tenure track. There were, talented young people who were helping out in some other room. There were 6 junior faculty when you came to this school. 4 of them are now tenured professors. Under Bill's watch, tenuring the junior faculty has become the norm, and the participation of all the voting faculty in the decision-making and the operation of the school has become something it's hard to imagine we ever didn't practice. But those are enormous changes. That grumpy group of individuals ran the school according to a 30-year-old curriculum, which we had neither the will nor the faith that it was possible to change, because we didn't really think that we'd be able to agree on anything new. We all had issues with the curriculum, and we really saw no way out of the problems that it presented. That curriculum is gone. We have a new curriculum. We have a new and enlarged faculty, most of whom were either appointed or tenured by Bill Graham. Bill, I hope that you feel very, very good about your accomplishment of truly taking this school into the 21st century. This is a new school from the school that you you came into 10 years ago, and it truly is a school for the future. Thank you very much.
This is a thank you to William Graham. I first laid eyes on William Graham down the hall in the Brown Room in a very dramatic moment. Our school was in a floundering mode, and the new president of Harvard University, Lawrence Summers, had decided to appear at the Divinity School one evening to announce to the faculty his choice for the new dean. I was serving along with many others on the president's committee and thought that an outsider would likely get the call. That evening, rumors were going around. Possible names floated in the air and passed between puzzled lips. And in walked Lawrence Summers with William Graham. I had known William Graham's scholarship, but this was the first time I had seen him. Agile, determined, and after looking around at the faculty, looking perhaps a bit puzzled as to what he'd gotten himself into. After a few years, I began to see a real difference in the school's spirit and its aims of education. I remember saying to people after a year in the faculty meetings that the school seemed like a boat unmoored in a harbor, floating around and banging into itself. Those grumpies that you talked about. But under Graham's indefatigable work habits and attempts to learn the job, it was clear to me that the motor was on. We were out of the harbor, and a pathway was being charted for ports that really mattered. And that's Bill Graham. While we faculty members have authority here at HDS, and we like to criticize our authorities, how shall I put it? Our faculty meetings slowly but surely became sites of largely rational discourse, productive planning, and even creative aims of education. Dean Graham, in my view, stood by his commitment to diversify the faculty, not only in ethnic, racial, religious, and gender terms, but in evolving disciplinary orientations and dialogues. His efforts in this area of a fulsome diversity gave new meaning for me to the words of William Sloane Coffin that, quote, diversity may be both the hardest thing to live with and the most dangerous thing to live without, end of quote. A series of excellent new colleagues joined the school under his leadership, and the faculty, and I must also say the staff, and the student body we have now, and the strengthening degree and ministry programs are as excellent and more diverse than HDS has ever had. And I think it's important to tie the excellence of the school with more diversity, because people still like to often think that if you have more diversity, you're going to lose the standard of excellence in the school. And this school, under his leadership, has shown the opposite to be true, that with the more diversity in the students, in the staff, and in the faculty, we've gotten to be a much better school. That's Bill Graham. Last year, I had the opportunity to read Bill Graham's book, Islamic and Comparative Religious Studies, his most recent book. And I participated in a public panel at which I was one of the respondents, and I found it quite wonderful and instructive to read this book, informing me about the existential and scholarly roots of his vision for both the classroom and his deanship, how he wanted to nourish in students and colleagues a deep curiosity and courage to take seriously what is said by the great stories told in cultures other than our own. He wrote about his own pathway of deprovincialization from his North Carolina childhood, through an undergraduate summer working in a hospital in South India, taking language and literature courses in Göttingen, putting together the Occident and the Orient in his formation of historical perspectives. He notes how this led him to his central question as a scholar and I think also a dean. He said, quote, my general question has been, how have Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, Christians, etc., made sense of their tradition, concepts, and practices, and how have students of Islamic, Hindu, Buddhist, Christian, and other traditions made sense of them in their considered interpretation, end of quote. Now, I dialogued with Bill about that etc. that he put in there. But in fact, his deanship has turned that etc. of what was here before into something living and engaging and hopeful here at our school. For after all, we now have 3 Latino faculty members, where before I came, there were none. What is also refreshing in this book is the number of times and ways he mentions the importance of great teachers in his life, the importance of great faculty members in his own development, not only for their excellence in the classroom, but because of the breadth of their vision in the study of religion. And I like this passage in an essay he wrote called Traditionalism in Islam, an essay in interpretation. He wrote of the importance of a chain of teachers going back through time, showing Bill Graham that, quote, "The truth does not reside in documents, however authentic, ancient, or well-preserved, but in authentic human beings and their personal connections with one another." I've been fortunate indeed to have the professional and personal connection with Bill Graham. When they first asked me to speak today, I wasn't sure whether it was a toast or a roast. So let me end with a story. I went to visit my dean in his office a handful of times, not 70, trying to bring some good news to him, but more often with my hand out, asking for support for this initiative or that colleague. Now, Dean Graham, as some of you know, is a long-distance runner, but sometimes he's a long-distance talker. I would go and put my petition before him. He sometimes had a dish with chocolates and other candies on the table. He would respond to my petition with a tour. After all, he's a scholar of the Quran and sacred languages, and he'd lay out a fulsome landscape of his thinking on the matter. His view, Harvard's view, a wider view, and back to his view. I'd say a few words, and then I'd leave. Going down the stairs, I'd have to ask myself, was that a yes or a no? I didn't always know, and so I turned one day to Mark Edwards, who was sometimes in the meetings, and Mark would say, "Oh, today that was a no." Or maybe, "Well, today you were lucky you got a yes." So I asked Mark, "How can you tell? And what is the sign of the difference?" And he said, "Oh, it's simple. When he offers the chocolate, it's a no." And when it's a yes, said Mark, no chocolate is needed. So Bill Graham, thank you for your leadership, the scholarship, the tours, and the teachings, and you deserve to have a sweet taste in your mouth from the years you served so well as dean. Thank you.
Bill's contributions to the school over the last decade have been many. Revising the curriculum, hiring so many faculty, renovating Rockefeller Hall, building the beautiful Divinity School green that we now have behind us, enhancing financial aid, and on and on. But I want to dwell today on a remarkable change this past decade that Bill led and really made happen along with the faculty, which really is a signal change in the life and trajectory of the school. And this has been the shift mentioned by my colleague Ann Browdy to a real tenure track system for the junior faculty. Bill was hired as interim dean and ultimately persuaded to serve over the longer term by Larry Summers. Larry did many things in his short 5 years at Harvard. Some very good, particularly for HDS, some less so. But one of the things he did from the beginning was attempted to shift and insisted on shifting Harvard from its then de facto 7 years and out junior faculty hiring, where only 1 in 9 succeeded in promotion to tenure when they got that far, to a real tenure track system where young scholars could come and grow and have a real chance at developing a long-term career here. Bill, as one of Larry's first new deans, was tasked with leading this change at the Divinity School. Now, most of you wouldn't remember what things were like before. When I joined the faculty as an assistant professor in 1997, no one had been promoted from the junior ranks since 1984, when Margaret Miles became the first tenured woman ever to have served on the faculty. Prior to Margaret, one had to go back more than a decade to find the next internal promotion to tenure. Junior faculty in my day had hopes, but not expectations. Now, over Bill's decade of service, by contrast, I'm delighted to note that 7 of us have been promoted to tenure from the junior ranks. Professor Monius, Professor Madigan, Professor Patton, Professor Best, who unfortunately left for other climes, myself, Professor Nasrallah, and most recently, Professor Walton, who we're delighted also to proudly welcome as the new Pusey minister in Memorial Church and Plummer Professor of Christian Morals. 7 in a decade, where there were only 2 in the preceding 3 decades. This has made for a sea change in what it means to take a junior faculty job at Harvard. And as Larry and Bill both had hoped, there's been a significant shift in the dynamics, the demographics, and the vibrancy in the faculty. Now, Bill was the perfect dean for this task, and perfect for it due to a distinctive, laudable, and uncommon set of character traits and virtues. Bill, you see, demonstrates the most remarkable intellectual generosity of anyone I have ever known. This plays out demonstrably in his deep respect for the scholarly acumen and abilities of others, regardless of their age, their rank, or their station. Bill, in short, expects the best of every scholar and expects it in the most generous and open way. This is so really regardless of whether one is an undergraduate or a graduate student, a junior faculty member, or at the top of their field internationally. Bill expects excellence of us all, and until shown otherwise, he presumes it. Now, I began to glean this the first time I ever met Bill. Met may be a little bit misleading, for we spoke on a scratchy international phone call in March of 1987 when Bill phoned me in Geneva, Switzerland, where I was working, to offer me a place in the entering doctoral class for that fall, thinking he needed to recruit me. From that first discussion on, Bill has always showed a remarkable interest in and respect for what my scholarly interests, agendas, and talents were, despite my youth or my junior status. When I took Religion 2002 with him a year later, I saw clearly that that same respect was extended to all the doctoral candidates. I took note then and have continued to take note since, for this trait is so generous, so productive, and so right. I worked with Bill as his academic dean in the early days of his deaning, when we were beginning the process of faculty building in earnest, and he was leading the subtle shift to making the faculty ladder mean a real tenure track. No one could have been better suited to this task than Bill. That abiding respect for the intellect and interests of others, his pervasive but presumptive expectation of excellence in others, his genuine and deep-seated desire to see us all succeed, and his willingness to do everything to make the environment amenable, with leaves, with housing support, with flexibility and appropriate accommodations. All of these have proven absolutely critical to all of our various successes. I'm personally grateful, Bill, but I'm also grateful on behalf of the school and the university, and really for the academy itself, for the changes that you've brought to this place, for the faculty you've nurtured and seen through. We honor you today, and rightly so. You have our deepest thanks.
I think all of the tall people have already spoken. So we've had a number of retrospective and prospective remarks about HDS, and much of value has already been said, which I won't repeat. But I will confine my musings then to ministry studies at HDS, and with your permission, I would like to look a little in both directions, both behind and forward. We have all heard more than we need to hear about the tension between religious studies and theological studies. Even now, many would say that the two are incompatible. For a very long time, HDS has resisted the split, certainly in all of the time that I have been here, if not the tension. It has held firm to the conviction that the academic study of religion is an inclusive term. Now, as someone involved in this adventure for most of my adult life, I have to confess that living out this commitment is not so straightforward as saying it sounds. It was into something then of a foggy swamp, to paraphrase Don Schoen, that Bill Graham ventured and sent some of us on when he said, I want to revise our curricular programs. And I want the MDiv to go first. We took him to mean, if we say there is no split between theological and religious studies, make it so, to borrow a term from Star Trek. Now, I called Karen because I had thought that my remarks were supposed to be a roast, and then I found out that, in fact, they were supposed to be serious, so you've gotten some serious remarks. I'm going to give you some of the others, then we'll go back to the serious thing. This whole business of changing curriculum and moving off into new ways and adventures is risky business. And I want to, with a nod to your successor, Bill, read from the Zion's Herald. That's the old Methodist newspaper from now 100 years ago, when Eliot retired as the president of Harvard, and these remarks were said of him, and I just want to caution you, Bill, about how they might be said of you. It has often been observed that when an able man has been long in a position of so high an honor and responsibility as to tax his energies and to the utmost on being relieved of the pressure, either by resignation or removal, he is liable to utter sentiments, perform acts, or exhibit a spirit which will surprise even those most closely associated with it. Then it goes down, but since he resigned the presidency, misgivings have arisen, whether in the vein of erraticism, always discernible and attributed to genius, is not to be too powerful a factor for the continued maintenance of his exalted reputation. Indeed, he has taken upon himself burdens much too much for the finite mind. Well educated, comparatively in a short period. Delicate, intricate task is yet incomplete. But with confidence unparalleled and calmness unequaled, he now offers himself as a prophet of a new religion. And it went on to suggest that those who sing in these hallowed halls here at the Divinity School, faith of our fathers living still, we will be true till thee to death, are shaking in their boots. The curriculum review that we did, I don't think left a lot of people shaking in their boots, but I do have to say that for those of us who work and live within the Divinity School and within the churches, when Bill Graham was appointed dean, somebody from the religious studies side and a scholar of Islam, there were lots of questions about whether his commitment to ministry or a commitment to ministry would be evident. And clearly, by putting the curriculum review and putting the MDiv first in that review, he made evident his dying commitment to that. I think now, 10 years later, 10 years and change, discussions at our faculty retreat in the fall, and also the conversations that have accompanied the search for the new dean, This whole notion of the two worlds and the hybridity that this faculty both represents and values has become absolutely clear. The messages that have been sent across the Divinity School and across the university is that we do not wish to split those worlds, really. We are at least well on our way to making it so. And as David suggests, that has not left us in a weaker place, but in a stronger place. We have the strongest applicant pools for students that I have ever seen in the 25 years that I have been here. Graduates from both the MTS and the MDiv are entering top doctoral programs in huge numbers. Graduates are serving in significant positions in religious institutions, universities, and seminaries. Religious life in the United States is, I think all of us would have to say, at a challenging transition point. And the future is incredibly unclear as far as I can tell. But I do believe what is becoming clear is that the most vibrant religious formation that we see in both the schools and in the religious institutions, the churches and otherwise, is imbued with both intellectual and spiritual vigor. It is when those two have come together that our future begins to have some color and shape to it. My hope is that that is true. It is then our reappropriation, in a sense, of that old 1636 commitment to the learned administering. And we thank you so much, Bill, for having given us the opportunity and guided the way to making our attempt at it in this generation. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Let me just say from the outset before I get started, hope you don't mind, but we've been giving accolades to Bill, and I will continue to do so. But I also just have to say that since my arrival in Cambridge in general and HDS particular, there's been someone that has been so hospitable and has been so attentive to me and my needs and the needs of my family. She has the grace of an angel and has a smile that would just light up the room. And for everything that we can say good about Bill, we know that there's somebody who helps him tap into the best parts of his personality. So I just want to take a moment to thank you, Barbara Graham, for all that you are and all that you've done. It is my distinct pleasure and definite privilege to participate in this celebration of William A. Graham's many contributions as dean. My fellow faculty members charged me with the ambitious task of looking toward the future of Harvard Divinity School. Let me admit from the outset that I am neither qualified nor capable of painting an appropriate picture of the potential of HDS. The work of the faculty is too capacious and comprehensive. Our students are too imaginative and intelligent. And the support staff here, from Matthew to Maritza, to Deacon Roy in custodial services, to Brother Ronnie in the mailroom. The staff is too committed, kind, and creative. Therefore, who knows what the future holds for Harvard Divinity School? Even as we can be more than confident in the beautiful hands and wonderful minds that hold our school together. Nevertheless, I still have about 7 minutes left to kill. And since Bill Graham and many of you advocated on behalf of my tenure case, I reckon I better say something that sounds smart and sophisticated. So let me take a sober and sincere approach to this challenge by suggesting a few possibilities forward, premised on the many positive developments our dear brother Bill has set into motion. By all accounts, you've heard them. Harvard Divinity School is different institutionally and ideationally from when Dean Graham took the helm. If we think about the leading departments of religion and schools of theology, divinity across the country, all are known for particular identities. There's Duke Divinity with this radical orthodoxy. Princeton University has its neo-pragmatism in the study of Black religion. UChicago is known for its robust historical and comparative religious imagination. Princeton Seminary for its weird Bardianism. And Yale Divinity's sacred music and intellectual Christian piety. These are all the defining characteristics. Under Dean Graham's leadership, it is safe to say that HDS has become hands down the leader in interfaith dialogue, interreligious literacy, and preparing religious leaders and scholars of religion to be at home in the world. Dean Graham had a vision to disrupt the broad and often ambiguous categories that structure, more often than not, the field of religious studies. A general moniker of world religions, for instance, obscures the internal diversity within particular faith traditions that may be based on racial, regional, and creedal distinctions. Theology, reduced to the task of a systematically ordering or constructively imagining theistic confessional frameworks, does not fully capture the historical context, the discursive logics, and even useful non-theistic application of this particular branch of knowledge. And the neatly ordered 5 subfields that typically constitute divinity school curricula, history, theology, ethics, biblical studies, and practical ministry, undermine the multidisciplinarity and creative cross-pollination that produces the most cutting-edge scholarship in the study of religion. This is how and why we're blessed with Laura Nasrallah, whose work on ancient texts, archaeology, and cultural studies reimagines biblical studies proper. Myra Rivera's constructive theology in relation to continental, post-colonial, and Caribbean philosophers is shifting the conversation in liberation theology. And Stephanie Paulsell's expansive interest in religion and modern literature typifies the aesthetic turn that decenters scientific certainty that can never caption the plethora of ways human beings know and conceive truth. Dean Graham tilled the soil here for young scholars of the future to take root. Again, to cite my colleague, Professor Nasrallah, to investigate religion in its place and its particular small manifestations, whether in ancient Rome or present-day Havana, is to really capture and represent with integrity and sophistication the religious worlds of real people rather than objectified constructs. A challenge yet remains. How do we, as a community, build upon and move beyond this transformative decade? How do we capitalize, maximize, and yes, even retain the special gifts and graces that are currently in place in HDS? And how do we transcend tired and worn debates of the 20th century that more often than not frustrated a comprehensive and capacious curricular approach that meets the sometimes divergent needs of an increasingly diverse student body. First, allow me to suggest that we must reaffirm constantly and value insistently the interrelated nature of what we all do. We are not here as academic free agents. We should not think of ourselves as intellectual, disciplined kingdoms unto ourselves. Nor should we police the boundaries of privileged approaches with draconian disdain for emerging views. To be sure, I understand that inter or multidisciplinarity should not mean the absence of academic discipline. Theories and methods have their place. But we have the opportunity at HDS to model the sort of collaborative research that President Drew Faust and Provost Alan Garber desire to see university-wide. You and I have the potential in our research, our teaching, our scholarship to work through our relationships, to open up even broader areas of knowledge. This requires intellectual courage. It requires academic boldness, true. But based on the brilliant minds that constitute this community, I have no fear that such an endeavor will undermine any perceived intellectual credibility that remains in place. Second, we must resist, as so many have already pointed out, particularly Brother Dudley, we must resist the ungraceful dance between so-called ministry studies versus so-called academic study of religion that has hindered too many institutions in this country. The reason I came to HDS 2 years ago has to do with the way that I knew that there is a teleology here in what we do. For me personally, I live out the vocation of ministry in my research and teaching. And like many of you, it is a divine call that I answered to enter the scholarly guild. Why else would otherwise smart and talented people give up our 20s and 30s in school to enter an uncertain job market with promises of becoming thousandaires at best? We do what we do with an ethical mandate and within a moral framework. This is true whether you're Buddhist, Muslim, or Jewish, and it can be true whether you preach like Charles Adams or whether you write like Professor Patton. HDS is producing religiously literate religious leaders, human service professionals, and research scholars, most of which interpret their careers as animated by a force and/or a cause greater than themselves. Historians of religions and social scientists train better pastors and rabbis. Professors of the practice train more sensitive social scientists, textualists, and ethicists. So whether you are a theologian, whether you're an ethicist, whether you're a homiletician, an anthropologist, we are all a part of the academic study of religion, and we must never forget that. A charge to keep we have, as we used to sing in my old Baptist church. Dean Graham, you've tilled the ground. You have planted many of us in place. Now it's up to us to grow together in faith and in love. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It is now time to move to the tent. I ask that everyone, as you move to the tent, that you find a seat at one of the tables, because there's going to be a second part of the program there before we get our food. Yes, I'm saying it is now time to go, and the reason you know is there's no chocolate.